Good afternoon. I will be discussing about organizational learning. Organizational learning theory is concerned with how learning takes place in organizations. It focuses on collective learning, but it takes into account the proposition made by Argyris in 1992 that organizations do not perform the actions that produce the learning, but rather it is the individual members of the organization who behave in ways that lead to it. Although organizations can create conditions that facilitate such learning. The concept of organizational learning recognizes that the way in which this takes place is affected by the context of the organization and its culture. So, what is organizational learning? Organizational learning is concerned with the development of new knowledge or insights that have the potential to influence behavior. It has been defined by Marsick in 1994 as a process of coordinated systems change with mechanisms built in for individuals and groups to access, build, and use organizational memory, structure, and culture to develop long-term organizational capacity. Organizational learning takes place within the wide institutional context of inter-organizational relationships and refers broadly to an organization's acquisition of understanding, know-how, techniques, and practices of any kind and by any means. It is emphasized by Harrison in 1997 that organizational learning is not simply the sum of learning individuals and groups across the organization. She comments that many studies have confirmed that without effective processes and systems linking individual and organizational learning, the one has no necessary counterpart with the other. Organizational learning can be characterized as an intricate three-stage process consisting of knowledge acquisition, dissemination, and shared implementation. Knowledge acquisition may be acquired from direct experience, the experience of others, and organizational memory. It is also suggested that organizational learning occurs under two conditions. First is when an organization achieves what is intended, and the second one is when a mismatch between intentions and outcomes is identified and corrected. Single loop and double loop learning are also distinguished. These are the two types of learning that has been described as adaptive or generative. Single loop or adaptive learning is incremental learning that does no more than correct deviations from the norm by making small changes and improvements without challenging assumptions, beliefs, or decisions. As suggested by Argyris in 1992, organizations where single loop learning is the norm define the governing variables as what they expect to achieve in terms of targets and standards, and then monitor and review achievements and take corrective action as necessary, thus completing the loop. On the other hand, double loop or generative learning involves challenging assumptions, beliefs, norms, and decisions rather than accepting them. On this basis, learning through examination of the root causes of problems so that new learning loop is established goes far deeper than the traditional learning loop provided by single loop or instrumental learning. It occurs when the monitoring process initiates action to redefine the governing variables to meet the new situation which may be imposed by the external environment. The organization has learned something new about what has to be achieved in the light of changed circumstances and then decide how this should be done. Single loop learning could be linked to incremental change, where an organization tries out new methods and tactics and attempts to get rapid feedback on their consequences in order to be able to make continuous adjustments and adaptations. In contrast, double loop learning is associated with radical change, which might involve a major change in strategic direction, possibly linked to replacement of senior personnel and wholesale revision of systems. It is generally assumed that double loop learning is superior, but there are situations when single loop learning may be more appropriate. Organizational learning outcomes contribute to the development of a firm's resource capability. It is in accordance with one of the basic principles of human resource management, namely that it is necessary to invest in people in order to develop an intellectual capital required by the organization, thus increase its stock knowledge and skills. As is stated in human capital theory, the knowledge and skills of a worker has which comes from education and training, including the training that experience brings, generate productive capital. Pettigrew and Whip in 1991 believed that the focus of organizational learning should be on developing organizational capability. Thus, this means paying attention to the intricate and often unnoticed or hidden learning that takes place and influences what occurs within the organization. Hidden learning is acquired and developed in the normal course of work by people acting as individuals and importantly in groups or in communities of practice. Evaluative inquiry is a method of enhancing organizational learning. It requires organization members to critically consider what they think, say, and do in the context of the work environment. The process of evaluative inquiry involves asking questions, identifying and challenging values, beliefs, and assumptions, reflection, dialogue, collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data, action planning, and implementation. One of the best examples of organizational learning is Toyota. According to The Toyota Way by Jeffrey Liker in 2004. This company looks at every problem as an opportunity to identify root causes and develop countermeasures. They use the method called the 5 whys, which goes like this. For example, our client refused to pay the leaflets we printed for him. Why? Because the delivery was late, so the leaflets couldn't be used. But why? The job took longer than we expected. Why? Because we ran out of ink. Why did we run out of ink? Because the ink was used on a large last-minute order. Why did this happen? We didn't have enough ink in stock and couldn't order new supplies in time. So the answer would be find an ink supplier who can deliver at short notice so we could continue to minimize inventory, reduce waste, and respond to our customers' needs. The notion of learning organization is sometimes confused with the concept of organizational learning. It should be remembered that organizational learning is about how people learn in organizations, while learning organization is about what organizations should do to facilitate the learning of their members. Let's now move on to management development. Management development is concerned with improving the performance of managers in their present roles and preparing them to take on greater responsibilities in the future. It has been described by Mumford and Gold in 2004 as an attempt to improve managerial effectiveness through a learning process. A systematic approach to management development is necessary because the increasing onerous demands made on line managers mean they require a wider range of developed skills than ever before. According to Tamkin in 2003, the abilities of a manager should be to empower and develop people, which means understand and practice the process of delivering through the capability of others, to manage people and performance, meaning managers increasingly need to maintain morale whilst also maximizing performance. To work across boundaries, engaging with others, working as a member of a team, thinking differently about problems and their solutions. To develop relationships and a focus on the customer, building partnerships with both internal and external customers. To balance technical and generic skills, meaning the technical aspects of management and the management of human relationships. Management development policy provides guidelines on the approach an organization adopts to the development of its managers. It is operationalized by the management development strategy. Maybe and Thompson in 2002 state that management development policy consists of three variables: the existence of written management development policy statements, the degree of organizational priority given to management development, and who takes responsibility for driving management development in the organization, which means the individual or the organization. What are the approaches to management development? We have formal approach to management development. The approach adopted by the organization is to provide support through a range of related activities such as performance management, development centers, personal development planning, coaching, and mentoring. A rigid, organization-wide program is not essential, although management development interventions such as those described in this discussion needs to be made. To extent to which management development activities or programs depends on the organization's technology, environment, and the type of managers it employs. The approach to management development should be based on understanding of how managers learn and develop, and of the use of formal and informal methods of development and development centers. Management development should be based on the identification of development needs through performance management or a development center making use of the following formal approaches: coaching and mentoring, the use of performance management processes to provide feedback and satisfy development needs, planned experience, which includes job rotation, job enlargement, taking part in project teams or task groups, action learning, and secondment outside the organization. Formal training by means of internal and external courses, structured self-development following a self-directed learning program set out in a personal development plan and agreed as a learning contract with the manager or a management development advisor. And lastly, competency frameworks, which can be used as a means of identifying and expressing development needs and pointing the way to self-managed learning programs or the provision of learning opportunities by the organization. We also have informal approaches to management development. Informal approaches to management development make use of the learning experiences that managers come across during the course of their everyday work. Managers are learning every time they are confronted by an unusual problem, an unfamiliar task, or a move to a different job. They then have to evolve new ways of dealing with the situation. They will learn if they analyze what they did to determine how and why it contributed to success or failure. This retrospective or reflective learning will be effective if managers can apply the lessons successfully in the future. Experiential and reflective learning is potentially the most powerful form of learning. It comes naturally to some managers. They seem to observe unconsciously and by some process of osmosis the lessons from their experience, although in fact they have probably developed a capacity for almost instantaneous analysis that they store in their mental data bank and which they can retrieve whenever necessary. Ordinary mortals, however, either find it difficult to do this sort of analysis or do not recognize the need. This is where informal or at least semi-formal approaches can be used to encourage and help managers to learn more effectively. So what are the informal approaches to management development? Getting managers to understand their own learning styles so they can make the best use of their experience and increase the effectiveness of their learning activities. This is the Manager's Self-Development Guide, which provides an excellent basis for this important activity. Emphasizing self-assessment and the identification of development needs by getting managers to assess their own performance against agreed objectives and analyze the factors that contributed to effective or less effective performance. This can be provided through performance management. Getting managers to produce their own personal development plans, meaning self-directed learning programs. We also have encouraging managers to discuss their own problems and opportunities with their manager, colleagues, or mentors to establish for themselves what they need to learn or to be able to do so. Lastly, we have development centers, which consists of a concentrated, usually 1 or 2 days program of exercises, tests, and interviews designed to identify managers' development needs and to provide counseling on their careers. They offer participants the opportunity to examine and understand the competencies they require now and in the future. Because behavior predicts behavior, centers offer opportunities for competencies to be observed in practice. Simulations of various kinds are therefore important features. These are a combination of case studies and role-playing designed to obtain the maximum amount of realism. Participants are put into the position of practicing behavior in conditions very similar to those they will meet in the course of their everyday work. An important part of the center's activities will be feedback reviews, counseling, coaching sessions conducted by the directing staff. Development centers use similar techniques to assess centers to assessment centers, but an integrated approach to management development will make judicious use of both informal and formal methods, and possibly, in larger organizations, development centers. The five governing principles of integrated approach to management development are: the reality of management. The approach to management development should avoid making simplistic assumptions about what managers need to know or do, based on the classical analysis of management as a process of planning, organizing, directing, and controlling. In reality, managerial work is relatively disorganized and fragmented, and this is why many practicing managers reject the facile solution suggested by some formal management training programs. Managerial work is undergoing such enormous and rapid change that many managers are reinventing their professions as they go. We also have relevance. It is too easy to assume that all managers have to know all about such techniques as balance sheet analysis, discounted cash flow, economic value added. These can be useful, but they may not be what managers really want. Management development processes must be related to the needs of particular managers in specific jobs. Those needs should include not only what managers should know now, but also what they should know and be able to do in the future if they have the potential. Thus, management development may include broadening programs aimed at giving managers an understanding of the wider strategic issues that will be relevant at higher levels of organization. We also have self-development wherein managers should be encouraged to develop themselves as self-directed development and help to do so. Performance management and mentoring can provide this guidance. Programs can be set out in personal development plans. We also have experiential learning. If learning can be described as the modification of behavior through experience, then the principal method by which managers can be equipped is by providing them with the right variety of experience in good time, in the course of their careers, and by helping them to learn from that experience. Action learning is a good method of doing this. And last, we have formal training. Courses can be supplement but never replace experience, and they must be carefully timed and selected or designed to meet particular needs. It should be remembered that individual managers are largely responsible for their own development but need guidance, support, and encouragement from their own managers and the HR function. The effectiveness and value of any approach to management development include the extent to which it links to organizational goals and context, and so has relevance for organization as well as for the individuals. Builds on and develops the qualities, skills, and attitudes of participants. Supported by appropriate HR policies to do with recruitment and selection, reward, talent management, and succession planning. Has the full commitment of those responsible for the operation of the process, and it should be motivating to those encouraged to participate in it. Before I end this presentation, Always remember that the only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them and having them stay, as said by Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company. Thank you for listening to our presentation.